Hey everyone, welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name's Steve Poikonen. I am in the middle of flipping nowhere. Uh, this interview is conducted by Roadside because we still haven't got the good interview. Doing great. Good internet's hooked up at the farm yet. Coming soon. I spent like an hour and a half on the phone with them yesterday. So if not beginning of next week, like midweek, something like that. Hopefully, by the time I get back from the In the Damn Wars protest in Sacramento on September 11th, speaking at the In the Damn Wars event in Washington, D.C. Do you like how I did that? That was nice. Uh, we have with us founder of antiwar.com and director of the Libertarian Institute, author of some fantastic books, including Fool's Errand. And we've got Scott Horton. How are you? Oh, are we muted, or am I just on a lag?
Yeah, I hit the button, then I forgot to hit it again. I'm great. How are you?
Sorry about that. You know, man, I'm doing really well. I got to go travel to Colorado for a couple of weeks, just got back, and am aside from the wildfire smoke, very, very happy to be off grid and doing much more worthwhile things, I think, like planning for the inevitable technocratic panopticon. How about you, man?
Oh man, same old thing here,
Man, I have so many questions for you, and I know that you have been making all of the rounds talking about Afghanistan, and we may touch on some of that, but I mean, anyone who's followed basically everyone that we hang out with, or reads antiwar.com as they should, or is like, familiar with our good friend Danny Sherson, probably heard some of the best analysis on the 20-year shit show going really all the way back to 79, 4-decade long shit show in Afghanistan from your mouth. And this morning I saw, and I tagged you in it, a post from the ACLU where the ACLU board was giving the case that vaccine mandates and papers please mandates are the way to more civil liberties, actually. And I thought to myself, A, we live in a fucking cartoon. B, I'm going to be talking to the man Scott Horton this afternoon. Boy, would I like to hear his opinion on their position. Scott?
Well, I mean, obviously on the face of it, it's ridiculous. The more important kind of thing is what's going on at the ACLU, where they are really changing from one thing to another. Look, I mean, they were never good on guns. And a lot of times, on social positions, they would, get things wrong in a statist way that a lot of people, libertarians and people on the right, might disagree with. But at the end of the day, they came down on the side of the Bill of Rights. And frankly, like, if it wasn't for them, the First and at least Fourth and Fifth and Sixth Amendments, would essentially mean nothing, right? It's their, decades worth of lawsuits against state governments and against the federal government for violating the Bill of Rights that has made it actually even a thing in force at all. In many ways, we'd be much worse off without them. And yet, what have you done for me lately? What the hell is all of this? But see, this is the problem with modern liberalism, right? Is they really reject natural rights, and they really reject the idea that freedom means the right to be left alone and do what you want without being coerced. Freedom in the modern kind of, LBJ liberal sense, and really worse, even more so now. The idea is, well, you get to participate in the government. So you get to have a role in ruling yourself or being ruled by your neighbors, but there's not really a line that they can't cross to tell you what to do or what you can't do. And so you'll just have to settle for freedom being participation in the system. But that's essentially it. Otherwise, whatever can be thought of and agreed upon by 50.01% is good enough to implement against anyone. And they would, I think they don't even see how funny it sounds. Like, to you, you're going, what the hell, right? But to them, this just makes perfect sense. That what you would do, see, is you would have the government set up this new structure of power in order that people might comply with it so that they can be freer, which sounds great, I guess.
It sounds Hegelian, is what it sounds like. It sounds completely upside down. And the idea that you have to surrender autonomy in order to get quote unquote civil liberties, it's this form of newspeak that it makes my head spin. And I was talking to Garland Nixon earlier today, and we only had like 14 minutes on the show, and it was the show, the Critical Hour that he does with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I didn't get to work in, hey Garland, you're an ACLU board member. What the hell, buddy? But immediately after the interview, he asked me back on a more extended panel tomorrow. So I'm going to, there's no way we're getting off of that without me raising this issue. That's going to happen. How often do you get a chance to talk to an ACLU board member, let alone be like, at least on a professional level, friends with one? And this is absolutely insane to me, Scott.
Look, you got to go after them on free speech too. I mean, there's this whole narrative now that free speech is essentially cover for the white right to get away with persecuting people. And that, real free speech means the right to shut up people who say things that you don't like or that you can argue somehow lead to actual oppression later or some kind of convoluted type thing. When the ACLU's position previously has been, hey, on your property or on government commons, free speech is essentially absolute. And they fought for that for decades, and famously, including things that sound like the argument ad absurdum that are really true. The ACLU fought, in fact, their Jewish lawyers fought for the right of Nazis to march through Skokie, Illinois, in a heavily Jewish neighborhood, which, I think Murray Rothbard would say, no, that street belongs to those Jews and they have the right to keep the Nazis out. The ACLU's position was it's a public road. That's it. And as long as they're not committing an act of violence, there's not a threat of imminent violence, they got the right to do it. This is America. That's it. And they fought for that on the principle of the thing, not for the principle of the Nazis, for the principle of anybody, to demonstrate, because as they used to say, this is America. And that used to mean something, that there are things around here, there are freedoms around here that we care about so much that we always will fight for them and always stand by them. And this is the kind of thing where this is something Glenn Greenwald has talked about a lot. If you follow his Twitter feed and in some of his Substack articles and all that, is about how
was I made aware of Glenn's Twitter feed today, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other crisis over there with Manning and all that. But just, I think he's written about how they are officially changing the ACLU's position on free speech. Like, it is not what it used to be. They had a big meeting and they rewrote the damn platform on it or something like that. So that's something to really go after the guy about.
100%. And you flash forward 40 years from Jerry Krantner defending the Klan's right to march, regardless of how abhorrent the Klan is, to the ACLU still will not acknowledge Julian Assange as a prisoner of conscience. We've got the popular position now, as we just kind of alluded to, being people who formerly worked with and stood with WikiLeaks, now being Julian Assange, now being distancing themselves as far as possible. I still, organize on behalf of freeing Julian Assange, so I'm not going to try and wade into what Glenn Greenwald was, are arguing about today. That's not trying to jump into that. Um, but overall, you're absolutely right. The trend has been post Occupy for the people who were typically the most vociferous defenders of the right to speak to being the arbiters of censorship from both a moral perspective and like somehow an academic perspective, neither of which they have, neither of which they're entitled to, but they feel some sort of sense of ownership to be able to put forth the concept that they're allowed to be the arbiters of speech. And that is the most ridiculous position that I can think of from arguably the most gullible voting bloc that we have.
Yeah. No, and it leaves us really in the lurch too. It really matters that you have broad constituencies in the public that will draw a line and stand by it, that you just can't get away with doing this or that. The bad guys have them for sure. Try to withdraw from a war and watch them bring out all the heavy guns, try to take $1, try to give $1 less to Israel and see what happens to the telephone switchboards. We need the broad swaths of the American left to be as good on free speech as ever, forever. That's it. This has to be, and the right wing too, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying the liberal stalwarts were the stalwarts. The leftists, hardcore Marxists and stuff are much less reliable on things like this. Liberals are much better than leftists typically about stuff like this. Where leftists maybe really go more toward the idea of what they'd like to shut you up about, where liberals have more of that kind of Voltaire principle, fight to your death, to my death for your right to say it, and that kind of thing. Where, so if it gets too normalized that, well, that was then and this is now, and that was in the 1990s, back in the olden days of the 20th century, but now things are different, then we have a real problem. But then if on the opposite of that, right, if the understanding is, oh no, come on, everybody believes in free speech, this is America, forget about it. And if everybody knows that, and if that really is true, then we get to keep it. But that's the whole thing of it. You really need, and that's still if we're lucky, right? But you really need, and look at what's going on with all the tech censorship right now. People say, oh, it's a private company and all that. Well, not really. But anyway, the point being that, well, where is the outraged, shocked lack of demand for these services provided by these companies who would dare to censor us this way? As soon as this began, how come everybody didn't quit Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and go, all of us, to the alternatives who wouldn't dare to do that? Instead, it was like, well, I hope they don't come for me next, kind of thing. And then, but they do keep coming for people over and over and over again. And I see old threads, people link old threads, and you look at the old thread and it's, this account has been suspended. This account has been suspended. You don't even know who it is or what they said. They can't even put like a kind of a faded red watermark. This account has been suspended, but still let you see what tweet it was from back in 2014 or something. Now it's been like tossed in the memory hole, and people should be a lot more angry about this than they are. And if we all were together, then they wouldn't dare try it. Instead, what happened? You have a couple senators, go out to California and or have these people come to DC and then yell at them. Like, we don't have any power to pass a law to make you censor people, but we're going to find a way to tax you one way or the other if you don't censor people for us anyway. And, the courts also should have immediately moved to strike that down, to figure out a way to like put an injunction on a senator from threatening a company to censor American citizens. Some kind of mechanism ought to kick in. The law ought to kick in. The Bill of Rights ought to kick in. And our traditions and the opinions of the 300 million of us ought to kick in and just be absolute about this, that you just absolutely may not do it. We won't tolerate it. We won't tolerate you for trying it.
Well, and this is primarily
this is on YouTube later.
I mean, well, honestly, what we've been doing,
they don't delete it.
What we've been doing the last like month or so is we'll go up to a certain point on YouTube, and then once we know everything else that we're going to cover is absolutely going to get us thrown off of the platform, we'll put the link to our Rockfin live stream, which is occurring simultaneously, kill the YouTube, and let the people who want to come over from YouTube finish the stream on Rockfin or Odyssey or everywhere else that we're streaming.
Isn't that crazy? That's
It
crazy.
is. It is ridiculous games that we have to play. But like my friend Burma says, we need the cat video people to be exposed to these kinds of discussions.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, on the off chance somebody catches like you or Dave Smith on Kennedy's show or what's the other dude's Gutfeld show, the Dave's on frequently, like they're not really getting exposed to libertarian ideas in that particular media. They're definitely not on the left unless somebody stumbles on our friend's show, The Convo Couch, and then they're going to start getting open at least to the concept that like people who come from a left space can be into civil liberties, and that doesn't automatically mean that they want to go blow Richard Spencer. Like it's ridiculous the way that everything has to be framed in such a mind-bogglingly silly partisan space.
About
none of
everything,
these
every
issues are
topic.
partisan. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah, on every single topic becomes so politicized. I saw a thing yesterday. A friend sent me a thing where a restaurant, I think it was a restaurant in Florida, says, if you voted for Joe Biden, get out. You're not welcome here. And it's kind of like, look, I'm no Democrat, but is that really how we want to go forward and do business in our society where we hate each other, not for being actual commies and Nazis, but just for being Republicans and Democrats? We're really going to absolutely hate each other. And I don't mean the Republicans and the Democrats, because of course you got to hate them. But I mean actual human beings who like may vote one way or the other out in the real world. No, dude, come on. What's the point in that? And I assume we all go down that path together. Where does that lead? You know what I mean?
No kidding.
We have a civil war. It's not north and south. It's town versus country in every city in America. Is that what we're going to do?
And it seems like that's one of the things that we're being pushed into. One of the reasons that I'm so supportive of what Magnus is trying to do with the End the Damn Wars thing, and like with his Unity or Death, podcast in general, is to just put forth the idea. And I've gone on many a rant myself saying the exact same thing over the years, that you can't vote your way out of an oligarchy. The oligarchy isn't going to legislate its way out of an oligarchy. That means where we're at right now are oligarchs and the rest of us. And if the rest of us don't put aside petty partisan differences for the sake of getting out of an oligarchy, all we're going to do is be bickering over which team that the oligarchy has represent a smaller and smaller segment of the population each and every voting cycle gets to be in charge. And we're going to bitch over that. And that's going to be life while this technocratic fascism runs roughshod over not just the US, but the entire West and the entire planet, essentially just relocating the capital of Rome every couple hundred years as one empire burns itself out.
Yeah, it sure looks like it. I always thought it was funny that there's this kind of sort of the conspiracy theory Bible in a way, Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley, where he says, look, I'm a pretty connected guy, and I know a lot of the secret history of what really has gone on here, and I want to tell you guys about it. Whatever. It's the liberal establishment versus the new right and all that. But rewind back to the beginning of the thing. I think it's even just like the prologue of the book, or the introduction of the book, is about the title, Tragedy and Hope. And the tragedy is what you just said, that all great powers blow their own brains out, and how they shouldn't do that. But then the hope is what if we could learn from history, by like reading his history book and learning that instead what you should do is, in the words of George H.W. Bush when he was being the exact opposite, be prudent and restrained in your power and try very hard to resist the temptation to buy yourself an empire, even if you think you can afford it, because ultimately you can't. And ultimately, history shows that these things always become self-destructive. And so there's the hope, right? That people could be smart enough and educated enough to preserve our republic and preserve, for that matter, Western civilization in the face of the broad script of history, which is that all projects of this size end up, destroying themselves from the inside if they don't end up picking a fight so big that they end up being conquered from the outside. And so and that's where the title of the book comes from. And so he says, let's keep our Constitution carefully and not blow it. And that's from a guy who, it's funny because he spends the rest of the book defending the Eastern liberal establishment for creating the world empire. And, and he gets all the heat for saying, well, sometimes they didn't go quite as far as they could have in fighting against the Reds, which the real answer to that is thank goodness. Right.
Well, yeah, because there was a nuclear option on the table a number of times, and I mean,
absolutely right.
No, I'll pass on that. But to kind of extrapolate from that a little bit, I would put forth that what he's saying about empire, that's every centralized power structure. That as long as you have a centralized government, as long as you have, and its only purpose is to make and pass laws and steal money before people get paid, and it has a monopoly on violence, then all it's going to do is increase in its corruption, increase in its fraud and abuse and its violence. And that's, certainly not unique to the West or the US, but that any centralized system is going to do that.
Yeah. As long as they can get away with it. I mean, that's the whole thing about, the libertarian obsession with the free market is there's got to be turnover. There's got to be checks and balances. And, it in free markets, you get a lot of that. Murray Rothbard said there never really was a steel king or an auto king or any of these things. You go to old restaurant, you see the knickknacks on the wall are all like old metal signs of companies you've never heard of because they all came and went. They served their purpose in their time and then they were gone. Whereas in government, even with democracy, the best you got is voting every couple of years. And between two very entrenched party systems, and very entrenched with the big business in, your community and in your state and in the country at large as well. I'm not downplaying that aspect of it, but, it's the turnover rate that we really need. You know what I mean? Any company that wants to try to defy the, the best outcomes for their customers ought to pay the price right away, or at least, as soon as possible. It ought to hit their bottom line and hit their investors for making their errors. In a real free market, the consumer is king. But instead, what do we have? I mean, in America, especially now, is the epitome of our government is so big, and then big business buys off the whole thing and uses it against us and uses it against their competition, and essentially turn the whole order of capitalism around, where now supply is king and the consumer can suck it,
Yep.
especially like look at healthcare, where, it's essentially like almost straight out of Mussolini's Italy or something, right? Where you have the all of the laws and everything are all written by the insurance companies and the hospital companies and the pharmaceutical companies, all to suit them. And so it's them and the government in conspiracy against, well, who is left to take the end of that? The patients, right? The customers, the sick people are the ones, instead of being served, they're the ones who are getting the shaft. And just because of the involvement of politics and the ability of, the broad mass of people to lobby compared to the ability of an insurance company to lobby to get their way. And so, yeah, it's totally true. And I think it's unavoidable, right? So then the question is, so what do you do about it? What you do about it is try to set up a system where people can fail and don't get saved from their failure. It's profit is important, but loss is also important. Any good libertarian favors capitalism, but not any particular business. And if Citigroup fell, I know we'd all celebrate and burn its, what's left of its corpse.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, and to kind of bring it back to your earlier point about YouTube and social media companies being private business, no, describing the partnership that the healthcare industry has with the government as being straight out of Mussolini is analogous to what's happening with big tech. You
Absolutely.
can't. I've been trying to tell people for years now that there's no way to decouple big tech from government. They're one hand washing the other. And when you've got Susan Wojcicki giving herself a free speech award for YouTube, while their algorithms are sitting there going back, in some cases up to 7 or 9 years to find a word that they don't like, to remove a channel entirely, that is quite literally, and I really hope Danny doesn't cringe if he's watching this, the overblown use of the word Orwellian, but that's removing history. That is.
Liz, it's nuts.
So many cases, just real quick, and then I'm sorry, but like at least our strikes have come from rolling clips of elected or government appointed employees or public servants testifying in their houses of office, and that's what's getting us the strike. Not our commentary, not copywritten music, although that's happened before as well, but not the positions that we're advancing, but the real, the reality that a member of Congress or the UK vaccines minister said these things in public and on record. That can't stand.
Yeah. Well, I was just reading a thing by Matt Taibbi earlier about a guy who's criticizing those who promote the alternative therapies for COVID. And the YouTube computer god struck him down too. And the only reason he got restored was because Matt Taibbi intervened and they went, "Oh, you're Matt Taibbi. Geez, I guess we better look at this." But, artificial intelligence is actually stupid and it shouldn't even be called intelligence at all. Intelligence is a uniquely human thing. It's just a computer with no personality or responsibility. It doesn't know anything any more than a polygraph test knows what the truth is. This thing doesn't know what you mean by anything or whether you're right or wrong about anything. It's some script that's essentially sent out into the wild. So now not only are you being persecuted, you're being persecuted by a robot, and it's nobody's fault. It's straight out of that book. And it's funny because we're having this conversation on such a high-tech platform here, but it's really straight out of the book Technopoly by Neil Postman, where this is where he complains like one of the worst things about the technical revolution is the disillusion of responsibility from human actors onto their instruments. And so I'm sorry, sir, you can't get on the airplane because the computer says that you can't. So it's not me telling you can't. It's the computer telling me to tell you that you can't. And there's no one to appeal to, and there's nobody who's wrong. It's just a screen and a light.
The last time I went out to DC, I had a layover at Sky Harbor in Phoenix, and I went to go make my connecting flight. And the lady goes, "Oh, we overbooked the flight. I'm sorry, you're bumped. You need to go to, this gate, this terminal, get in line for the standby list." And by the time I got over there, Scott, in the computer, I had gone from oversold and bumped to missed flight. And so they're telling me I have to go to the bottom of the standby list and I'm probably not going to get out today and all this I had to go through 7 humans to get to the original lady who told me that oversold and you're bumped before anybody else would believe it, because the computer said, oh no, you missed your flight, you're screwed.
Yep. Well, same thing for, yep, we're turning off your YouTube channel because the computer misunderstood something, possibly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not even
Orwellian.
expecting YouTube like administrators or moderators to have a sense of humor. So when
It's
the
more like Terry
algorithm,
Gilliam, right? Where it doesn't work right. It's a totalitarian state, but it's all fucked up.
I mean, I do all the time. If there's a catchphrase here, it's "We live in a fucking cartoon," and each and every day, I get more and more reasons why that's a thing. At least the cherry on top this morning being the ACLU saying, "Here's why mandates are more civil liberties." Actually, that's just totally upside down. But now the talk, and I do kind of want to touch on Afghanistan a little bit. I personally, I think that all of the hype around it is serving as much as there is like a real danger and a real threat and some real horrors that are going on there. I think that largely the media focus on it has been more of a distraction than anything. And this concept of, the Afghans now having like more strike aircraft than a third of NATO states, and all of these like numbers that they're throwing out at people. The ones that are the most horrifying are the ones that I've seen coming out of the reporting in anti-war, which is the cost in terms of dollars and the cost in terms of human treasure, human life, resources. And I did see that the global war on terror since its inception has cost around a total of $21 trillion. And we are 8 days away from the 20th anniversary of Donald Rumsfeld giving a speech about a missing $2.1 trillion from the Pentagon, which has now been extrapolated to be that 21 that they've blown over the last 20 years. This is, I mean, is money even real, Scott? Is money real?
Hey, well, our Pentagon budget's real. It's a great question there. I wish I could remember the name of the guy. I don't even know if I could find it. I went back and looked. I interviewed a guy. I can find it, The Nation. I interviewed a guy that wrote a thing for The Nation. Because listen, I really solved a lot of the problem of what's going on with accounting at the Pentagon. And I'm sorry, I forget the names of the gimmicks, but there's like these 6 or 8 gimmicks that explain how they double count things or half count things or triple count things or pass things in different accounts and all of these different things. And the missing $3 trillion is not so much missing like somebody just straight up embezzled $3 trillion. It's just $3 trillion that they never really accounted for coming in and out at certain times and whatever. It adds up in that way. And what's interesting too, right, is when Rumsfeld gave that speech, what was the purpose of that speech? What he's doing was he was trying to beat the army over the head with that missing money so that he could then push his transformation of the military agenda, which said focus on special operations and air power for light, fast, quick regime changes, and then on to the next one kind of a thing. And so he was saying, you army generals are a bunch of goddamn bums, and I'm going to put you in line. I'm going to give your money to the Air Force and SOCOM instead, was kind of what was going on there. But, look, to the larger point, I think William S. Lind had it absolutely right when he said that the Pentagon budget is the biggest honeypot in the history of the world. There's just never been anything like it before. So no matter what business you're in, let's say you just sell plywood or you sell tube socks, like you're destroying yourself if you're not trying to get a Pentagon contract. You have to get a Pentagon contract. You're a rep for Colgate toothpaste. You're not worried about the Pentagon? Of course you're worried about the Pentagon. You put your best guy on the Pentagon, man. Right? And it just distorts everything. It's a, as they call it, a self-licking ice cream cone. And it comes with all its own, self-justifications and special interests. A guy, again, I don't remember who the hell said this, but I thought it was smart that, when you wonder things like who's really keeping us in Afghanistan, it could be as simple as like a few guys in the State Department and the CIA who you've never heard of, who just have a real good heroin thing going on right now. And they're in a position to just prevent the few stars from aligning that would have to align for a change to happen. And they're there to make sure that those things don't happen. And you can't even see it from where you are,
Well, and now
that's
we've
speculative, but you see what I mean. It's all just it's tiny little narrow special interests all working together for what's good for them, when the national interest has nothing to do with it at all.
John Kiriakou was on the show a while ago, and he told me that the reason we had a vested interest in the poppy in Afghanistan was because it facilitated a soft war on Iran and Russia, in terms of destabilizing the population, because that was predominantly where the Afghan heroin went.
That's what Eddie Griffin said too.
Eddie Griffin?
Yeah, Eddie Griffin has a whole bit like that. Like, why do you think we're there? We got these poppy fields rocking, and then who's doing all the opium, man? It's the Chinese and the Russians. It's all part of the Cold
Eddie
War.
Griffin's woke as fuck, dude. So it's possible. That's crazy. I didn't know that. John's one of those guys where like it's reliable up to a point, and then he's told me at least 2, if not 3 different stories about his version of 9/11. So I'm a little,
so yeah, now
and I like him, and I'd have him back on the show, and I would,
that he's
go do his again.
So that's, I'm trying to remember what he wrote in his book about that too, because I read his Accidental Spy or whatever it is. So what were the different versions that he told you about that?
So the first version was he was at the Pentagon, but he was in a completely different part of it, and that nobody really knew what went on. And by the time that they got there, or got around to the front, it was already like shut down, cordoned off, and everything. The other story was he had a buddy who worked there, who was a guard there, who was at one of the gatehouses, who saw the plane and could testify that there was one. He's never been able to produce the dude or tell me his name or anything like that. And then the other story that I heard was another variation of that. He had a friend that worked there, who was a guard there, but wasn't at the tower, but was in the building and did like look out a window and see the plane. And look, I
all enough about.
I still have yet to actually see
So the first time he was famous was when he came on and defended the CIA torture program and said that, look, they only tortured 3 guys and they waterboarded them, and it was just they waterboarded them a couple of times and it was not a big deal. And then the next time we heard of him, he had confirmed the identity of some torturers to Matthew Cole, the journalist, who immediately got him burned. And and I don't know if he named him. I forgot what happened there, how he got named. And he ended up going to jail, going to prison. Yeah. And then, he's certainly been palling around with our very good friends since then. And I've interviewed him quite a few times. And I've always gotten along with the guy. He seems pretty forthright. He said a lot of, some pretty quotable things about some things that he knows. But that's interesting what you say about like his story shifting around about some things there a little bit. I don't know.
And look, he's on the right side of the angels where Julian Assange is concerned. He's done some great work
Dave
on
Hale
that.
too.
Yeah, 100%. He was out in front screaming that The Intercept is a honeypot for whistleblowers, and if you go to them with information, you are also going to prison. And was out there early talking about that, not just with Matthew Cole, but The Intercept has a whole stable of individuals that, from Jeremy Scahill to Matthew Cole to let's see, Matthew Cole's name is on Reality Winners document, or her release, I believe, but also so Ryan Grimm's is, and somebody else's too, and I can't remember. But
well,
they were all.
I know that John told me that he doesn't blame Scahill or The Intercept for Daniel Hale, as much as he has a vendetta against Cole for obvious reasons. He says, "Nah, Daniel Hale got himself caught, man. He was doing documentaries and giving speeches and was very open, essentially, about even palling around with Scahill. I think at places. I don't know if they did an event together or an interview together, or something like that. So that one is not on them.
Scahill was in a number of
some
events.
The others are, yeah, huh?
Yeah. Go ahead, though. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just said, so apparently that one is not on them, according to Kiriakou there. But certainly Reality Winner is, and I forgot who else they got burned. Who else did they get burned?
Oh my God, I'm gonna kick my own ass for this. I tweet it out all the time, and I'm drawing a blank right now.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that you're right, but I can't remember who.
There's 4, if not 5.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really bad.
Well, Piero Midyar is a financier of color revolutions.
Yeah.
That it's not like, and openly worked with some of the worst venture capitalists. Well, not that he's not, but he's buddies with Peter Thiel, who, by the way, just gave Glenn Greenwald a whole crap ton of money to exclusively post video content, but that's a whole different story. Like it's Glenn tried to go his own way a couple of times. Glenn always winds up taking like massive amounts of money from shady billionaires. I don't know. Who's to say that I wouldn't be like tempted to in a similar situation? I'm not Glenn Greenwald. I don't have his pressures. But Scott Horton, Peter Thiel comes up to you and says, "Hey man, here's $600,000. Only do your show on my platform." What are you saying?
Nah, I wouldn't do that. I got a server.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
Then again, though, like, as you're saying, he does have a lot of costs, bodyguards and, lawyers and things. So I don't know. I don't know. Nobody's ever offered me $600,000 for anything, so it's easy for me to talk a lot of shit.
Right. It's dude.
I wouldn't do that. What I'm gonna take? I already got an archive of 6,000 interviews, or almost 5,500 interviews. I'm gonna lock that up.
Right. Right. Well, and who's to say what happens to your archive isn't exactly what happened to the Snowden archive or the Snowden documents, where, they'll only put out maybe 5% of it. Oh, and then, by the way, we're going to take that 5% down, and that other 95%, well, we have personally decided that you aren't equipped to read it.
Yeah, it's interesting. There were all these accusations that Greenwald has privatized the Snowden leak, and he sold the Snowden leak to Pierre Omidyar, and all of this kind of thing. But when Greenwald quit The Intercept, he said none of that was true. Nobody has those documents except for him and Laura Poitras. And and I guess Barton Gellman from the Washington Post, but that's separate. He got a separate leak, so whatever he did with his. But Greenwald says no one has ever had possession of these other than him. So when they only published this small percentage, it was him.
Then it's
who decided.
Greenwald.
And this is, I kind of quit trying to interview Greenwald a long time ago after he quit answering me, but I just sort of gave up on the idea. But, I would like to hear a couple answers about that, because I know that there were a lot of very pro-Greenwaldian people who were saying, man, there are more stories here. Publish more and publish faster. And the idea was, no, Snowden wanted me to be very, very careful. And then the answer was, yeah, no, be careful, but just go faster. Partner up with more partners. Do what you got to do to get this stuff out there. And it seemed pretty clear, right, that the excuse was, look, there's a lot of, personal information of innocent people in here and stuff like that we don't want to leak. But that seemed to be kind of standing in for, we can't leak anything more that we have. But, here's one thing that was funny. I think it was not until 2017 they published at The Intercept. It was Murtaza Al-Qaeda Hussein there at The Intercept, the big Al-Qaeda supporter there, published a leak, an NSA document that showed where a Saudi princeling was directing the Free Syrian Army on the ground in Syria and telling them to attack Damascus suburbs, civilian areas, and telling them to Damascus to so-called flatten the airport was the direction that he was giving them, to attack the airport. And then this was published, and then the context was all twisted to I forgot exactly what his spin on it was. But my spin on it was, man, you guys had this document when? In the spring of 2013. 2013, right when, the intervention had been going on for 2 years already. But this is right around the time that ISIS is splitting away from al-Nusra, and the government, here and all our allies are spinning that. Yeah, see, that's what makes Nusra so moderate, is that they're left of ISIS, I guess. And so, all of this. And so here was this awesome inside document from top secret NSA document about the Saudis being involved in directing these guys to kill civilians, and showing that the FSA are not local moderates. They're forcing mercenary terrorist murderers. And this is such an important story. And then it get published for 4 more years. And then when it does get published, it gets published by Murtaza Al-Qaeda, who goes out there to kind of spin this for the terrorists and the CIA's point of view.
Meanwhile, we had Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett, who were on the ground in Damascus, in Eva's case, in Jerusalem, I think, or Gaza, rather, saying exactly what you just said from the ground, from the perspective of people living there, interviewing the people who also live there. And they get maligned as terrorist sympathizers. In Vanessa's case, she was threatened by the BBC. In Eva's case, she's on a watch list in Ukraine as a terrorist sympathizer. Her ability to travel in there is now being pretty well compromised. So she's been more or less just staying at that place in Russia with a really cool cabin. Jealous. But I mean, that's that's how it goes. I have a theory, Scott, I want to run by you, and that's the primary role of the media since consent has been manufactured, because in my opinion, it was manufactured, if not before, by the time the ink was drying on the Patriot Act, at least in the media, the corporate writ large, including a number of independent outlets. And now what the media does is manufacture confusion, and they ratchet up division and tension and keep people as befuddled and thereby malleable as possible. We've got a like the group that we were talking about earlier, that now believes that the only way that you can be for free speech is by determining who's allowed to talk. We've got those people. We've got the people that think that there's a magic man who lives on the 8chan boards, who has a crystal ball, who can see the future. And in the future, there are unsealed indictments that are going to arrest all of the pedophiles on the planet, Scott, and there will be peace on earth, and Donald Trump, Phoenix like, will arise from the ashes of his own destruction as a god emperor, and regain the presidency in 2024. And then between those two groups is what our I guess spiritual advisor Ray McGovern calls the Mickey Mat.
Yeah.
The military, I'm gonna fuck it up because Glory's not here. The military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex, motherfucker.
Oh yeah, that
Uh,
was great.
uh, which I mean, it's we've also got to incorporate, and I think Ray has a way around this. But I mean, tech and pharma, and really what they call a public-private partnership, what
Right.
Mussolini called fascism.
Right. Yeah. Nick Turst has a book where he just calls it the complex because it's everything, right down to the tube socks. It's the entire economy. As David Stockman calls it, the great deformation, this massive entire distortion and bubble of the American economy geared toward militarism, where it's just not supposed to be at all. And it does. It just absolutely taints everything. And um, part of the thing with the state of confusion is it's really, a big part of it's come from the internet. So right at the time that you had in a sense, the democratization of communication, especially through Web 2.0 with Facebook and Twitter, um, right at the time that you have that, you have the complete discrediting of the American centrist, center left liberal establishment, led by the Bushes and the Clintons. You have disastrous wars, and then the massive financial catastrophe, the global depression brought on by the crash of 2008. It just completely discredited these people in power and discredited the news media that said that everything was great. I mean, for Christ's sake, Alan Greenspan's wife hosts the afternoon show on MSNBC when he was the guy who blew the bubble that popped in '08. It's just incredible to see. And so what happened was people just turned away. But then the problem is people are really dummies, man, and they don't know how to really figure these things out for themselves. They don't know where to start. And so they pick whoever seems confident and seems certain about what it is that they're pushing. And then you have, let 100,000 Bill O'Reillys bloom. And then from every point of view. And like, in fact, I have my own little silo, right? Like there are people who just listen to me. They don't pay attention to the news at all, except they get it from Horton. He seems honest enough. And they've learned to trust me over time. I'm their guy. And then, but they're not exposed to too many other points of view because
Mhm.
this is like the group that they've decided that they're kind of part of. And I'm very anti-sectarian. I try to, get along with everybody, interview people from all different perspectives, as long as they're good on the war and that kind of deal. But so there's a little bit of a counter action there that I'm not just interviewing libertarians like myself. In fact, I'm mostly not. But everybody has their own little silo. And then so when you're only hearing about the other side from your own side's point of view, right? You never get to hear what the liberals or the conservatives say. You only get to hear your side say, the liberals say this, the conservatives say that, and paraphrase
Mhm.
them in the least charitable way. And, we're the only good guys fighting for truth and justice against your enemies, everyone else out there who would destroy you. And so then it becomes kind of an all or nothing thing Well, you're not on the side of the people who hate you and are trying to kill you. Well, so therefore you're on our side. And if that means you got to believe, 15 fantastical things that couldn't possibly be true, like QAnon, it doesn't matter how wrong he's been this whole time, or China is about to cross the Pacific Ocean and invade California, or whatever it is, or the Russians, Vladimir Putin is the secret master controller of Donald Trump and his entire campaign, or what. So people don't know even what doesn't sound right, and then it's like Mark Twain says, where it's a lot easier to convince somebody of a lie than to convince them that they've been convinced of a lie. And once they bought something, now tell them that they've been a fool, and they'll be like, screw you, man, I am not. You're the one who's the fool. So I saw an example of this recently on Twitter where someone was asking, I think it was the one where they were saying that Trump is in the White House and he's been the president all along, and the whole Biden administration is a put on being hosted at Tyler Perry's ranch in Georgia, where they have a mock-up of the White House and this and that kind of thing. And someone posted a screenshot of someone saying, yeah, but and then he lists like 3 or 4 reasons that just make that seem impossible. Like, what about all the foreign press in Washington, D.C. that's going along with this? And what about Fox News and even, ONN or whatever it is, the OAN and all these right-wing Newsmax? Even Newsmax isn't saying that Donald Trump is in the chair right now and that Biden's presidency doesn't really exist. I mean, what? And then he ends with, so how do they do it? Why are they wrong? How is the conspiracy able to convince them all to tell the lie? Instead of, come on, man, this guy's jerking your chain. You just explained why he's full of shit. Just go with that. But instead, it's, so tell me, what is the fantastical explanation? I'm ready to believe it. Just give it here, And because people are seeking consistency. But consistency with what? They're starting from like floating upside down in the dark, and they don't know which way is up and which way is anything. And so,
they
know
know
the
what
Democrats
they
are evil. So that makes sense. If you tell them the Democrats are evil and then you tell them a bunch of other things, then they're like, okay, well, that makes sense, I guess.
They know what their biases are. They know that there's a place they can go where they get their biases confirmed. It's what we've been calling hope porn, essentially, and it's a place. So okay, bear with me for a minute, please. uh uh are you familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality test?
Oh, vaguely, yeah, from junior college days, yeah.
Just so there's like 16 personality types, and out of those 16 there are 4 that are hardwired to be anti-authoritarian. That doesn't mean that like 1 out of every 12 people is anti-authoritarian. That's not the way personality types break down. They don't do it in a linear fashion. But it does mean that any 1 out of 8 people in a room could be the only person in the room that thinks the way they do about the way that the world is working, or what they see happening through the Biden administration, Trump administration, through that, the 40 years of endless Reagan night neoliberal CIA nightmare shit that we've been living under. And so they feel like there's nobody, they're the only one. So when they find a niche group online where they're getting their biases confirmed, then they're automatically drawn into it. And they're drawn into it almost with the same fervor that one would a system of faith. Which largely, in an increasingly secular society, the same energy that would go into a system of faith has gone into political identity, and individual politicians have been deified. Pictures of Jesus hugging Trump in the White House, shit like that, and so what that does is it creates almost, I don't know, a sense of like disassociation when you try to point out the inconsistencies in that now faith-based system.
And guess who, right? YouTube and the idiot artificial intelligence algorithm again. You know, watch one thing on history and they'll start showing you stuff about how aliens created humans, and you'll get like the whole like kook version of history from all kooks when all you were watching was something about the Romans or whatever. And you know, famously to me, YouTube's margin showed me Ben Shapiro interviews or statements or debates or whatever about 100 million times before I finally clicked on one. There was finally one with a headline interesting enough where I was like, okay, I guess I'll click, because I know who this guy's caricature is. I don't need to know anything more than his caricature. I'm already done learning. But anyway, so I finally click on the thing, and first of all, it's just so funny hearing his voice for the first time. It was just hilarious. But anyway, but just the point is, like, YouTube basically kicked down that door in my head. Like, you are going to watch this asshole at some point, and we insist, because you know their algorithm says that once you watch something by him, you'll watch more. And so there you go. So we're talking about all these silos and all this crazy shit that people are into these days with all their crazy media things. But who's directing them while they're doing their research? It's YouTube. It's the computer god at YouTube. The same one who will turn you off for saying what they think is wrong will send you on rabbit trails of pure, you know, mental filth and total mis and disinformation for years. You know, they're probably the leading cause of this kind of thing in the first place. You know,
I mean, with having the largest video streaming platform and the second largest search engine being a company owned by the parent company Alphabet, essentially being a DARPA project in itself, I would posit that that is intentional, Scott Horton.
sure, why not? Well, look, even if it's not, look, it's just, you know, dumb ass technology run completely rampant with, you know, and then their claim is, well, look, we're trying to fix it. So what we're going to do is we're going to shut you up. You know,
Right, but and there's I see the chat here. There's people that are like, you know, Jordan Peterson is excessively promoted on YouTube, and that's true too. I've been seeing a lot of Lex Friedman, which I honestly appreciate. Like that
I
guy's
don't know who that
fairly over my head, but he was like an MIT you know, like AI person.
Oh, okay.
And he's got a podcast where he's interviewed like everybody from, you know, other award winning people in just groundbreaking research fields to like Rogan or Michael Malice. He's got a debate, Scott, between Michael Malice and Yaron Brook, and it's like 3.5, 4 hours long. Like, it's fascinating. It really is. But I mean, it's one of those, just, I think what it is it's as stimulating as it can be. Most of it's over my head. And it's one of those distraction algorithms where when I could be productive, now YouTube's figured out that I have poor time management skills, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Which, look, it makes sense just from their point of view, for their clocking dollars. That's their job, is getting eyeballs on ads. So you don't need anything more nefarious than that. And it's, you know, goofy shit tends to be, you know, more, I guess, serially addictive or whatever. You know, I want to watch this whole series by this guy now that he told me some crazy thing or whatever. You know, I guess that works. And then, and look, I'm for that. I'm for that. I mean, I think it sucks that the algorithm is that careless, maybe, you know, but as far as, you know, free speech, I stand by what I said, that just more debate about everything by everyone is the solution to all of this. You know, you try to, again, there was a guy who was pulling their point of view, Matt Taibbi's piece today, a guy who's criticizing all the alternative therapies for COVID, got censored and a strike against him and almost thrown off of YouTube when he was doing what they wanted him to do. But their stupid thing just couldn't even understand what it was. So he didn't have the opportunity, at least for a while there, until someone intervened, to win the argument. And they're relying on censorship and shutting people up to win the argument, but that never works. And once you censor people, that just makes them, they know that they're right. You know, why would they be censoring mentions of ivermectin if it wasn't the wonder drug, magical cure all that cures everything? It obviously is, or they wouldn't be censoring it, thinks the average brain when he sees censorship happen. You know what I mean? It becomes the obvious answer that it's the secret truth that they're trying to bury. It's not bad information that they're protecting me from, you know?
Well, and look, I know people who way back in February who had existing respiratory things, who before it was a bad word, had doctors when COVID was hitting early who said, look, you should take this as a prophylaxis, and you should increase your daily vitamin C. You should supplement some vitamin D, and you should use, basic barrier techniques if you go out, because you already have this thing. You're in a risk group. You should actually, you should be a part of the group of people that utilizes basic barrier techniques, and you should be fine. And she was. I know people who have got sick who specifically ordered human ivermectin along with a number of other things, that took it, who immediately, within 72 hours, COVID gone. It, point being is that there are, in my opinion, rushed experimental drugs that are still operating under emergency use authorization, when one of the conditions of that EUA is that there are no other available treatments. And we know that there are a host of them that have been used for SARS illnesses over the years, that are effectively doing the same thing, which is either kicking out or getting rid of the living parasite that a virus is, or they are mitigating symptoms to the point to where your body's natural antibodies kick in and are able to kick out the thing. And the reorganization of society over it, I find incredibly troubling. I'm not trying to debate anyone over whether it's, real, or whether David Icke has a point, or, I'm not trying to have that conversation.
It couldn't be
What
that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just joking. It couldn't possibly be that.
This fucking I mean, look, dude, the whole 5G thing, that's a conversation that I'm willing to have with anybody, but not for this. That's silly. I wow. But my point is, the reorganization of society over an incredibly statistically survivable, is what I mean, wholly survivable, to the point to where if you're not already in an existing risk group, there's no reason to participate in an experiment without informed consent. Survivable, is incredibly troubling to me.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the government shouldn't be in charge of any of this stuff. Let the free market work it out. And that's why it's all so politicized. And that's why everybody's all wrong about it, because it's all about what team you're on. When viruses don't have politics, you
Yeah.
know,
No.
but as long as you have an FDA and a CDC and especially centralized national government control over who's supposed to be doing what at any given time, then you're going to have these problems. Harry Brown wrote this great book back 20 years ago called Why Government Doesn't Work. And one of the great arguments in there is because anything they touch becomes a political football, even if it never was one before. But once government is involved, now everybody has to fight to the death over who's in control of it, so they can control what it is that it's making people do, or making people stop doing, or whatever it is. And so this is obviously the perfect case of that, where people's politics, I mean, I've heard people say a million times that I should or shouldn't get the vaccine because of all this stuff I read on Facebook. You know what I haven't heard a million times? I asked my doctor about it to see what he thinks. Maybe you should start there. I met a girl last night. Her mom died of COVID, and she had a really hard time. She was one of the first people to get it back, a year and a half ago. And then her mom ended up dying of it. And her mom had been terrified of getting the vaccine because of what she read on Facebook. But she was in her 60s and, had whatever other problems. If she'd been vaccinated, it's almost certain she would not have died. But she didn't get vaccinated because her Facebook friends said, oh, no, you'd be a damn fool to do that. You know who she didn't ask? Her doctor. What he thought. Because who would have thought of that? I wonder what your doctor thinks. And instead, again, geez, I don't know. I'm on team don't like Democrats, and team don't like Democrats knows that you're supposed to eat ivermectin and not get a shot. None of us are doctors. None of us know anything about anything, but I saw it on Facebook, and all of my stupid idiot friends agree with me. And so what are you supposed to do? And of course, on the other side of the debate too, on the other side of the thing, you're supposed to be absolutely terrified of the germ, but not worried at all about the vaccine. And in fact, not even worried at all about forcing your neighbors who are worried about the vaccine into getting one too. And why? Because all your Facebook friends agree with you. And they know that that's the smart thing to do. And so, and because, what are you on Team Trump, you idiot? And so go take your horse paste. Me and all my Facebook friends all agree on what idiots you all are. Meanwhile, did you actually talk to your doctor? You actually, make an actual calculated risk on this at all? Or we're only going by tweets? We're only going by politics.
Yeah, no, and making something like your health or public health political is one of the more insidious things. I think that if we had a rational conversation about it in the media, and if we genuinely brought all of the doctors and all of the studies, all of the available data, that we would have a much better picture of. I'm pro-informed consent.
I totally agree with
Scott.
you.
That's where I'm falling on this, and I do know that it's statistically speaking the highest number of what do they call it, vax hesitant people are PhDs.
Yeah.
And I mean that to me at least tells me that that there's enough there that you need to evaluate where your health is, what you do to maintain your health, and go from there. Personally, I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to do it. I get that like they're reorganizing society, but like I live in a giant state, and if I don't get to travel as a result of this, that's why I'm up here. I just technocratic panopticon versus the ability to still organize and possibly, at least resist things like mandates and forced inoculation. Feel like we got a shot for that, and I feel like we should do it. And I think that I don't know. The last time I checked, the libertarian position, except for there was that article a while ago, but the libertarian position on mandates and forced inoculation was no.
Oh, I mean, I think there's one guy who calls himself a libertarian in our entire society who happened to get an interview on TV to say the wrong thing here. And he wasn't speaking for any other libertarian. No libertarian says that it's okay to force somebody to take an injection, even if you're trying to achieve herd immunity or whatever it is. There's no reason in the world any libertarian would accept for that. And I mean, that's clearly not in debate. But in fact, I mean, what I think is a important note here is how ripe America is for its libertarian moment. I mean, if anything, Ron Paul was just too old too soon, and he ought to be, 57 and running for president next time. Unfortunately, that isn't the way it goes. But America is in such a severe crisis, and it's the libertarians who are right about everything. It's the libertarians who are right about the lockdowns and all the government intervention in the name of the germ. It's the libertarians who are right about imperialism. It's the libertarians who are right about crony capitalism and bailouts for bankers and major corporations, and who are right about the police state and the war on drugs and decentralization of power and all of that kind of thing, federalism, and on down the list. Getting rid of all of the absolute unfairness in the criminal justice system and all of the licensing and fees and things that keep poor people from going into business and being able to, achieve for themselves and all these things. The libertarians are the ones with the right answer for everything. And right at a moment when the empire's crumbling, the lockdowns are completely insane and out of control, when police are killing people 2 or 3 a day on average every single day, where, essentially people from the entire left and right and town and country and north and south and black and white and everybody are all sick of the same things. This massive overreach by government into our lives and into really, especially in a financial sense, undermining the fabric of the society itself with all of the destabilization that comes with their economic, interventions and problems that are caused by it. And so it seems to me like this is really the time for the libertarians to make the case that, look, even if you guys are leftists, or if you're, lean progressive or socialist or lean right-wing populist or conservative or whatever it is, you have to agree with this agenda. It's the freedom agenda. You stop doing all the worst things first. And so you shouldn't have to you don't have to move from the left toward libertarianism or move from the right toward libertarianism. You can still be you. You just got to agree with us that these are the worst things and these are the things that have to be undone the most first. And I think that the polls show more people identify as independents than Republicans or Democrats right now. And obviously huge swaths of the American public are just non-voters and refuse to participate in it at all because they're not dumb enough to believe that they have any power and influence at all. These are, I think, all people who essentially could rally around that message that, look, it doesn't have to be this way. We could just knock off all this bullshit and then we'd be fine.
So let me ask you, and then I don't know how long you can stick around. Maybe we can
I actually got to go because I got to eat and then I got to do another interview.
Okay, so real quick, what do you think about Dave Smith being the standard bearer for the Libertarian Party in an election? Because that's a dude I would love to talk to, but I have a pretty hard and fast rule about I don't interview candidates. So I'm hoping to have that opportunity before the guy actually announces. But I mean, in terms of someone who can articulate that position, I haven't heard anyone front runnery Spike maybe, but not to the point that I have seen that guy do it. So do you think he's serious about that, or what? I know 2024 is a long way off, but by the time everyone's in Vegas next year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't speak for the guy, but I would very much like for him to run. I think Dave would be great. And I think Spike is great, and I really like Justin Amash too, frankly. But I think that Dave is, he's got the collection of traits that make him the best for this job. Really, I want Spike to be the commissar of internal information inside the Libertarian Party. I saw Spike give a speech in Colorado. Well, I've seen him give a few speeches. I saw him give the speech in Colorado, and yes, it's true that he was plagiarizing me somewhat, and that was what made the speech really great. But I told him to, so it's fine. I ain't mad. I'm happy about it. But he gave such a great speech, and I thought, if I could just tweak the framing of it just a little bit, it would be, a little bit more emphasis on, listen up, you SOBs. This is who we are. This is what we care about. This is what our priorities are. Here's how we do it. And this is the damn deal. Are you with me? Go team. And just a little bit more of that part of it. But just hearing him talk and hearing him give his speech and talk about all the people that he reached, traveling all around the country, and all the people that he met, while he was running for vice president, and all the different things that he learned about how to communicate with people and all of this stuff. It's just such great stuff. And I would like to see him like have the Professor Griff job, as Minister of Information inside the LP, that where like, look, this is the line. And who says so? Spike says so. And he yeah, at the very least, give the man the LP's Twitter account, right? At the very
right. That's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, no, I mean, I would like to see him get the Professor Griff job. And then I'd like to see Justin Amash run for Congress as a libertarian and win as a libertarian. And I'd like to see the Libertarian Party give it their all to support him and see if we could actually get a real member of the House of Representatives with an L next to his name. It's too bad that he didn't switch parties earlier in the thing, but still.
I would like to get Justin Amash stoned and have a serious conversation with him about anarchy.
I kind of would too, yeah. The only time I had a chance to meet him, there were a lot of people around, so I didn't want to like get into it with him or anything.
Right. But, well, Scott, it's been a pleasure. I would love to do this again. And for anyone who for whatever reason was unfamiliar with you, please let everyone know where they can find you, your outlets, and your books, and what you have coming up. And thank you again.
Yeah, hey, thank you for having me, man. So I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute. That's libertarianinstitute.org. And I'm the editorial director of antiwar.com. And I'm the host of Anti-War Radio. That's on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA on Sunday mornings. And the Scott Horton Show. And I got 5,500 interviews going back to 2003 for you at scotthorton.org. And I wrote Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And also I published a book called The Great Ron Paul, which is a collection of 30 interviews that I did with Dr. Paul, plus a speech that I gave about how much I love the guy. That came out in 2019. So I'm very proud of all of those, and I think that's it.
Well, thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. I will hopefully run into you in Vegas at the convention next year. Believe I'm still Adam Kokesh asked me to be a delegate for him last year, and when he was still running for president, and he had the best platform out of anybody that I could think of to run for president, which was, I believe, legalize drugs, free all political prisoners, and then begin the immediate and peaceful dissolving of the federal government.
Yeah, political prisoners, that's an important one on the list. For sure.
I can get behind that.
And everything. Yeah, man.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, man. And everyone else, dude, thank you for sticking around. The show is sponsored by Matrix Bars. Matrix Bars are mushroom chocolates. There are 3.5 grams in each bar. You can get a hold of them on Facebook, or not Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Matrix Genetics, MATRIXGENETIX. They told me they have a new flavor, so I should be getting that next week, and we'll of course demo on the show. I've got video to upload and a report from the last time that I owe you guys. Man, I do not want sponsors for the show unless I can actually believe in and endorse the product. So there we go. Scott Horton, everybody. That was rad. And look, if in case anyone's curious, you should. Oh, the QR code isn't up right now because the video quality for this was pretty shitty, so we didn't put it up. But if you need to scan the QR code, either pull up an old video or hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at SlowNewsDayShow. The show is entirely audience supported. We do have a GoFundMe up and running for the month. I didn't get it in the description on the Rockfin, but I will try to pull it up here real quick before we split. In the meantime, buy Sleepy Josh a coffee. Sleepy Josh needs the coffee. I need the coffee too. But you can do that by going to buymeacoffee.com/Bort, BORT. Big shouts to my better than your co-host Glory Jones, who will be with us tomorrow. I think I gotta do an earlier get your shit together too. We gotta figure that one out, because until we get good internet, like, I'm basically doing this here, or I would have to like shell out ridiculous amounts of money that I don't have and shouldn't spend anyway on a hotel room. And I'm not really feeling that. Um, we're just not in a position to do so. Um, so I will talk to the crew about what that might look like. Dropping the GoFundMe link in the YouTube chat. We are way the hell behind on it this month. That's my fault. And then look for new interwebs coming soon that are hopefully going to be kick-ass. This Sunday, Richard Gage, architects and engineers from 9/11 Truth, will be back on the program. Always a good conversation with Richard's Tea Leaves. Thank you for the Super Ray. Is that me, Josh, or is that you?
Shouldn't be me. I'm muted.
Okay, rad. And then Billum, thank you for the Super Ray. Richard Salimbo, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then what else? Oh, Piers Robinson on the 19th. That's going to be kick-ass. Awkward, September 12th. We've got my good buddy Rook McPherson, I used to work with from the Renaissance Festival days, who's most famous as the character Skidmark, who's got a YouTube video with like 1 million some hits. We'll play it again, breaking down how money works and how political influence works, and character of homeless mud beggar during the Renaissance Festival era. That's my homeboy. I used to work with him. He'll be back on the show. We got lots of cool stuff coming up. You should definitely be a part of that. If you dig what we do, you should endorse the channel on the Rockfin. $9.99 a month. You get all of the paywalled content on the platform. Really good way to support the show. Other than that, man, I just thank you guys so much. We will see you soon. Big shouts to Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos. Love this motherfucker. Good luck to us all.